So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Millennium Gloucester Hotel here in London. My name is John Partridge. I'm joined by Shay Holland, and we are here for the final instalment of this year's WMCQs. Another day standard.
Yep.
Got something to look forward to.
This is the second standard WMCQ, with the one 2 weeks ago being modern. So far we have two winners from each of, well, one from each of them. The original standard WMCQ was won by Tom Law, who is quite a well-known grinder of the UK.
He certainly
He's
is.
a very good player. Definitely looking forward to him being on the team.
Yes. And the second one?
The second one was Kaya Patel. He's also a grinder. I know he's attended quite a few PTQs and PPTQs in the past. Good player. He won with Grizzle Shoalbrand.
Yes, he
which
did.
was very interesting. I was there for the final, and he was playing against Burn. And that is quite an interesting matchup. It depends how many skull cracks they have. Depends on who wins.
They were certainly two decks that, when we were sat there thinking, we saw the rest of the top, we were thinking, this is very unusual. We didn't expect those two decks to be there in the top 8. Obviously, the initial WMCQ won by Tom Law was standard, and he won with blue-black control, beating Jeskai tokens in the final. Again, two decks that you don't necessarily used to seeing in the top 8s as you go along.
It was interesting, actually. So I was reading some stuff about that weekend. Apparently, most of the decks that won the WMCQs that weekend in standard were actually blue-black control.
Oh, wow. So control making a comeback.
Yeah, the blue-black control deck seems quite strong. Languish definitely helped as another Wrath effect that it was really missing, and it seems to be interesting at the moment. So we are just waiting.
So the players are just sitting down for the player briefing. Obviously, it's a bit quieter now because we've managed to shut the doors. What we'll do first is we'll just have a quick overview of the past few weeks and what we're expecting to see a lot on camera today. We believe there are 8 or 9 rounds today. We're not sure where we are quite on the threshold. We'll obviously find out.
So I believe we have 8 rounds today.
So we didn't quite hit the 220-person threshold to go into 9 rounds, which obviously for us means we only have to commentate 8 rounds today. The split again, as with a lot of the WMCQs being now 2-day events, we have our 8 rounds of Swiss today.
Yep.
And that'll be followed up by our top 8 first thing tomorrow morning.
Yes.
So the players who do make the top 8 will unfortunately not be able to play out that day. They'll have to go and do a bit of testing, play the matchups they think they might be playing against. Obviously, we imagine that the teams that are there will have a good idea of what else is going to be there, and obviously we'll then be able to do some testing.
Indeed, and for everyone who doesn't make it, there is a modern GPT where the winner wins a playset of Goyfs.
Yes, and we will be covering that once we finish the top 8. We will be doing a style which means we finish on the top 8 and we'll go straight into the GPT wherever we are with that. Obviously, the first event standard. Now, this man put a card in front of me, which is probably going to be one of the more popular cards today, having a look around.
Yep.
The standard's in a very unusual place at the moment.
Yeah, so it's kind of certain cards have really warped the format. The one that I've put in front of you is Courser of Crufix. This card has been extremely powerful since it was first came out. For those who don't know what it is, it's the 1 green 2/4. Players play with the top card of their library revealed, and you can play lands from the top of your library.
Yeah. Now, this has been a defining card in standard for
almost
since it was released. Yeah. It took a little bit of time to get in. Obviously, it came into the Jund Monster build in the original Ravnica Theros block, just as a way of hitting your land drops, cast Stormbreath Dragon, and all the Planeswalkers. But obviously, block constructed was its big standout performance. The block constructed Pro Tour Journey into Nyx, it was everywhere. It was what held those green decks together. Definitely. And since then, now we've come into this format again. People have tried to replace it with other things. People thought Nissa might replace it, but the card is still there, and it's still the powerhouse that it was before.
Yeah, it's seeing a little less play now, and that was because of the printing of Dromoka's Command. Yep. Dromoka's Command has the mode of target player sacrifices an enchantment. Corsair is from Born of the Gods, and quite a few creatures in that set were enchantment creatures.
They certainly were, and it's interesting that the decks that are playing it normally only have that as the enchantment.
Yeah.
So Dromoka's Command will always have a target.
Yeah.
And it's been one of those cards that, yes, Dromoka's Command has existed, but it still exists as 4 copies in a lot of decks. The Devotion deck's using it because it's got double green pip. It's also a 3-drop they can play on turn 2, which gets an advantage. Abzan Control, pairing up along one of the probably the most known cards from Khans, obviously with Siege Rhino.
Yep.
That card is, even when Abzan has not been great, Abzan has still been there, and it's still put up results, and that's on the back of Siege Rhino.
Definitely. Siege Rhino has definitely made Abzan a very, very popular deck.
And the defining factor of that, of course, you look at how many decks Abzan exist. You've got Abzan aggro,
Yep.
Abzan mid-range, when we had Caryatid in the deck, which obviously then morphed into Abzan control.
Yep.
Abzan Megamorph, and the one thing across all those decks, 4 copies of Siege Rhino.
Yep. It's such a powerhouse. You know, the 4/5 body on with trample for 4 mana is extremely good, even in standard. When it's also a 3/3, when it also drains 3 when it comes into play, you know, you're looking at a very, very powerful effect. It's good against almost all of the matchups as well. You know, against the burn decks, you're gaining 3 life, which is very relevant. Against the mid-range decks, when, you know, a few life points can matter, it's relevant. And I mean, against control, you know, sometimes you just need to do that last 3 points of damage, and resolving a Siege Rhino is that.
And sometimes you need a 4/5.
Exactly.
It can't be ultimate priced. And that's one of the fascinating things, is that they've not just attached a gain 3, but they've also attached a drain 3. So it takes your opponent's life, and then it attacks them in chunks of 4. One of the powers of Siege Rhino, especially in the mono-red matchups, is it ends the game very quickly.
Yeah.
It does not take many attacks from a Siege Rhino to put you within range of the second one. And as we know, for the viewers at home who have maybe played against Siege Rhino or not, they don't come as ones, they come as packs.
They always come in
Clashes.
2s or 3s.
They always come
I believe the plural for Siege Rhino is a crash.
A crash of Siege Rhino.
A crash of Siege Rhino. Sounds fitting.
It certainly does. And one of the descriptions obviously people had was they're like London buses. You want one to arrive, none to do, and then they all arrive at the same time.
Exactly.
And for anyone who has been on the receiving end of 3 Siege Rhinos on a trot, it is quite something to behold.
It is.
As a 4/5 is huge. And that's one of the other defining factors of the Abzan mid-range deck that exist. They've got very high toughness. And the mono-red decks, if you play a Corsa, they just go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to have to probably 2-for-1 myself right now to get this off the table.
Almost certainly. That's one of the reasons that Corsa was such a big play at the time. It was this 2/4 body that was very hard to get past. It would normally result in the burn player having to use two kill spells to kill. Or it was using a Stoke, and you're more than happy for your opponent to be pointing a Stoke at your Courser of Crufix. It's 4 points that you're
It gains a lot of life outside of just the 1 life a turn, because it normally has to take another spell, whether that's a Wild Slash, whether that's a Lightning Striker, depending what it is, whether that's a Stoke the Flames, or even a Valorous Stance. Like, that's protecting a Siege Rhino at the same time.
Exactly, yeah. It's definitely a card that was very popular and very powerful against the decks that it was very good at. It was also quite good against control, because it gave them the card advantage they need. So instead of them drawing 2 lands in a row, they'll draw 1 land and put 1 into play because from the top of their library. So they got to draw another land on top anyway.
And obviously over the last few weeks we've seen Abzan more in the guise of the Hangerback Abzan. So that's going more to the aggro version, which is Fleece Main Lion, Vanna Fenzes. Obviously used to have Rakshasha Death Dealer, which has now been replaced by Hangerback Walker. Makes the mana a lot cleaner, which was one of the problems before, is your mana base was reasonably painful. And obviously Siege Rhino going across course is not in that deck. But one of the defining things also is that Abzan is all over the place, and having looked in the room today and had a walk around, there's a lot of Abzan in the room. More of the Hangerback variety, because I think people are like, this deck's very powerful, has a nice amount against control. Obviously, pre-board you have the Dramox commands, which are very good against the red decks, so you have a bit more to play against them. However, one of the interesting things walking around this room is we've had the rise of Abzan, but we're actually seeing over the last few weeks, especially coming out of the GPs, out of the Star City games and coming into today, Esper Dragons is on the return.
Yep. And there's a reason for that. The Esper Dragons list is very, very powerful against the Hangerback Abzan deck. The Hangerback Abzan deck is quite fast, and it's shaved most of its removal for cards like Dramoka's Command. Hero's Downfall is very good. It's a very strong card, and it kills a lot of planeswalkers.
Yes.
Abzan Charm doesn't. So what's ended up happening is a lot of people have switched to this control-y deck with the planeswalkers. So Ashioks and Jaces, and you have even an Ugin or 2.
Yes.
And they're very strong in those. They're very strong with that, because the Abzan deck has a very tough time to deal with that. An Ugin, -3 Ugin, or -4 Ugin, pretty much wraths the board completely, other than Hangerback. And also there is Silumgar Drifting Death,
Which is
and
almost impossible to kill.
Well, It is impossible to kill for the Abzan decks because very few of them, in fact, none of them seem to be running the Foul-Tongue Invocation or any other edict effects.
Because obviously one of the other differences for the Abzan control deck is that they've moved away from Crux of Fate and they've gone to Languish instead.
Exactly. And it also has, whenever a dragon you control attacks, give defending players creatures -1/-1. So what that allows the Esper Dragons players to do is kill the Hangback Walker and attack with Silumgar and completely kill all of the Thopters. And the reason Hangback Walker is so powerful is because unless you exile the Hangback Walker, if you kill it normally or it blocks or whatever, it makes an army of 1/1s. And, you know, that is an immensely powerful effect for most decks to deal with, and a lot of decks can't.
Yeah, you think of Stormbreath Dragon decks, you think of things with Thunderbray Regent. That's a blocker that does it for a lot of time, and they're very unlikely to be able to kill 2-3 Thopters.
Exactly.
While the rest of the deck goes to work on their life total.
Exactly. And a lot of the removal at the moment seems to be very 1-for-1.
Yes.
And
so for that, you're looking at Heroes Downfall, Abzan Charm,
Ultimate Price, those kind of cards.
Bile Blight maybe to a lesser or greater extent. Normally it's a lot easier to play.
Bile Blight seems to be falling off as well. You know, a lot of the Abzan decks used to run 4 of, but in their 75, sometimes down to 3, maybe 2. A lot of the decks now aren't, and that's something that seems to be very interesting. Is most of the Abzan decks at the moment seem to have just taken out their Bile Blights and they're running the Languish instead.
Yes. The control deck obviously still able to run them. So moving on to Esper Dragons, obviously Esper Dragons, a deck which has become more apparent. Obviously, it's driven by basically a blue-black shell, splashing white for between 3 and 4 copies of Dragonlord Ojutai.
Yeah.
Obviously, Dragonlord Ojutai, 3 white-blue, 5/4 flyer, which in itself is ginormous. The card is very difficult to block.
Exactly.
It's got hexproof when it's untapped, so you cast it unless they have something to get rid of it that way. And need expect it's very hard to remove. And then also, when it attacks and it deals combat damage to a player, you get to anticipate. So you look at the top 3 card, take one with you, put the rest to the bottom.
Yep.
It's card advantage. The deck also runs Silumgar's Scorn, which goes very well with the card. It's basically counterspell.
It is.
At that point, blue. Force Spike, for those who don't know, obviously the card is counter target spell unless control pay 1, or you can reveal a dragon, which just counters it. And it just becomes the most powerful counter spell currently in standard.
Definitely. It also has copies of Foul-Tongue Invocation. They seem to be running around 2 now. Foul-Tongue Invocation is 2 and a black for an instant. Target player sacrifices a dragon with the additional cost of you may reveal a dragon. If
sacrifices a creature, reveal a dragon, not sacrifice a dragon.
Sorry, target player sacrifices, or target opponent sacrifices a creature. You may reveal a dragon. If you do, then you also gain 4 life, which is very good because it helps out with the aggressive decks, the burn matchup, because that 4 life is very relevant. That's a burn spell a lot of the time.
One of the other benefits of it being target player is you can target them without a creature.
Exactly.
So if you manage to kill all your red deck opponent and they start trying to burn you out with exquisite firecraft, you can go, well, no, actually this isn't going to happen. I'm now going to prevent this happening. Yeah,
it's extremely powerful, and it's it also is very good against the burn decks because you do have this Ojutai, which is very hard for them to deal with, and it's such an impressive clock.
So obviously moving away from that, obviously we've just heard that pairings are being posted for round number 1, so we'll have our first feature match very soon for you guys at home. But we've spoken about Abzan. It's always the boogeyman. Abzan is. It will always be there. It has been so powerful. So it's one of those things that with the fact that Abzan is so strong, is how do you then deal with it? And obviously some of the decks that have been dealing with it are things like Jeskai have come in and they've tried to use Ojutai's command to get that and get around it with Jace. Jace obviously being a very powerful effect against the Abzan decks because you're able to mitigate a bit of the removal spell by being able to draw extra cards, get rid of stuff that you don't need.
Yep.
Whilst also being able to use Mantis